My best friend demanded I bulldoze my grandparents' farm for her 200-guest wedding, then branded me a monster when I said no. I live on a small farm that's been in my family for generations, a gift passed down from my grandparents. It's a beautiful piece of land tucked away behind soft, rolling hills, with an old red barn and a garden overflowing with wildflowers and vegetables. There's a certain magic here. Maybe it's the same wonder I felt as a child, running through tall grass while my grandmother watched from the porch. Over the years, friends have marveled at the place, often joking that it's the perfect spot for weddings or parties. One of those friends is Emma. She's teased me forever about how she'd tie the knot on my farm someday. She'd say things like, "When I get married, I'm claiming your barn." We'd laugh and imagine a small, intimate gathering under the stars. But 2 months ago, Emma actually got engaged, and, as promised, she asked if she could host her wedding here. I'll be honest, part of me felt flattered. My best friend wanted the most significant day of her life to unfold among my fruit trees and vintage wooden fences. It seemed sweet, so I told her I'd think about it. But I quickly realized her idea wasn't just a humble, rustic ceremony. Emma envisioned a full-blown, 200-guest extravaganza, caterers, live music, elaborate decor, and enough lights to make it look like a fairy tale wonderland. That alone felt overwhelming, but then Emma mentioned all the adjustments she wanted. She hoped to level a section of the field for a dance floor and parking, trim or cut down certain trees for a better view, and lay gravel paths for wheelchair accessibility. She called these adjustments necessary to make her dream wedding possible. I get the importance of accessibility, but hearing her outline plans that would reshape my grandparents' farm, my literal home, felt like a gut punch. I couldn't help picturing bulldozers rolling through the grass where I once built forts with my cousins. The idea of turning my peaceful haven into a construction zone made my stomach twist. I told Emma the changes were too drastic, but offered a compromise. If she really wanted to celebrate here, maybe we could have a smaller, simpler ceremony. Fewer guests, less chaos, minimal changes. Surely that was possible? Emma's response took me by surprise. She was furious. She said I was ruining her dream wedding, that I was being selfish, and even hinted I should feel lucky to have inherited such a property, so I ought to be more accommodating. Those words cut deeper than I expected. It's true that I was fortunate to inherit the farm, but that doesn't mean I have no right to protect it. Beyond my own sentimental attachment, hosting that many people isn't exactly a picnic. It's a logistical nightmare. We'd need special permits, additional insurance, a plan for trash and cleanup, a parking solution that doesn't block the winding country road, and my animals. I have goats, chickens, and a few beloved barn cats. Where would they go for days, maybe weeks, while construction, setup, and tear-down were happening? Emma, however, kept insisting it would save her a small fortune. And yes, as her friend, I want to help, but not if it means turning my own life upside down. It's not just a matter of finances. It's the emotional toll of watching my grandparents' cherished land morph into a stage for someone else's vision. The more Emma pushed, the more torn I felt. On the one hand, I know how important weddings are. On the other, I can't ignore how personal this space is for me. When I told her I couldn't handle such an extensive renovation, or the hassle, she called me selfish again. Now, I'm left reeling. Am I really a bad friend for drawing the line? Is it so outrageous to want to preserve the place my grandparents worked so hard to build and maintain? I never asked to be in this position, and yet here I am, feeling guilty for wanting to protect my home. Emma's disappointment weighs heavily on me, but I'm also grappling with an even bigger question. At what point is enough simply too much? So, here I am, stuck between saving my treasured farm or giving in to my friend's dream wedding. I can't shake the unease in my gut that tells me those bulldozers, the trimmed trees, the crowd of 200 strangers dancing on my grandparents' fields, just isn't right. I wish Emma understood the depth of that feeling. But since she doesn't, I have to stand by my decision. And that's why I'm wondering, does refusing to host her massive, life-changing wedding make me the villain in this story? Update 1. Things escalated way faster than I ever expected. Right after my original post, Emma found out, either through a mutual friend or because she recognized herself in my words, and confronted me. She accused me of shaming her publicly. I tried explaining that I needed an outside perspective before making any final decisions, but she wasn't having it. According to her, my real motive was to sabotage her wedding so I wouldn't have to give up my precious farm. That stung because I genuinely wanted to figure out if I was being unfair. Meanwhile, a couple of our mutual friends started blowing up my phone with conflicting advice. Some insisted that if I truly valued our friendship, I'd take one for the team and just go along with Emma's dream since it's, theoretically, a one-time deal. Others pointed out that Emma's always been a bit entitled, especially when she feels passionate about something. They thought I had every right to keep my boundaries, even if it meant a meltdown on her end. The biggest shock came when Emma's fiancé messaged me directly, telling me that he was extremely disappointed in how I'd handled things. He said I was being cold to Emma at a time when she needed support the most and that it was my duty to step up because I have such a perfect space for them. He kept using phrases like ideal backdrop and it's a once-in-a-lifetime event, as if that alone should override all my concerns about property damage, personal stress, and the emotional toll of turning my grandparents' legacy into a commercial venue. I calmly explained to him that hosting 200 guests and basically reconstructing a chunk of my property requires more than just a can-do attitude. It involves permits, liability, noise ordinances, plus a logistical plan for trash disposal and potential overflow parking along the nearby road. And let's not forget my goats, chickens, and barn cats. Moving them is a headache in itself, especially if we're talking about building a dance floor and prepping for a full week of setup and teardown. His response was a lukewarm acknowledgement that yes, it's a lot of work, but I would make Emma the happiest bride ever if I did it. I was pretty floored that he and Emma both seemed to treat my place like a blank canvas, ignoring the fact that it's my home, with my own routines and memories attached. So I reiterated my compromise: a smaller wedding, fewer guests, and minimal structural changes. That didn't fly. Emma said a small wedding wasn't an option because they've already started inviting people, 200, going on 250 if you count plus ones. She also implied that if I really cared, I wouldn't mind dealing with the stress for a few months. The few months comment freaked me out. In her mind, she's not just talking about the wedding day or the weekend leading up to it. She's factoring in weeks of construction, planning, and coordination that would likely fall on me because it's my property. I thought, does she expect me to hire a contractor to flatten part of my field? That's thousands of dollars on top of the mental and emotional burden. Eventually, I made the decision to hold my ground. I told Emma and her fiancé this was non-negotiable. No big, invasive wedding. If they wanted a toned-down version, we could talk. Otherwise, I wasn't budging. Emma stormed off in tears, and her fiancé basically said he hoped I'd come to my senses. Over the next couple of days, I found myself in the middle of a storm of opinions. A bunch of mutual friends and acquaintances hopped on social media to share their 2 cents. Some were outraged on Emma's behalf, calling me stingy for not wanting to share the farm for one day. Others were fully on my side, pointing out how demanding and dismissive Emma was being. My DMs turned into a war zone of unsolicited advice, moral judgments, and people telling me to get over it because it's just one day. But it's not one day. Hosting an event that size is like a giant domino effect of prep work, structural changes, liability issues, and potential damages. If something breaks, if someone gets hurt, if the local authorities get involved over noise complaints, whose name is on the deed? Mine. And I'd be the one dealing with the fallout long after Emma's honeymoon is over. I also started thinking about future weddings. If I let Emma do this, I worry it'll set a precedent. What if other friends or extended family see how great it turned out and start asking to host their weddings, birthdays, or even corporate events here? I'd feel trapped, because once you say yes to one person on that scale, it's hard to justify saying no to others. My small farm, the place I inherited and cherish, would risk being treated like a public event space, and that's the opposite of the quiet life I've built here. Around this time, I got a phone call from Emma's mom, of all people. She told me she understood my hesitations but also guilt-tripped me about how Emma's father died a few years ago, and Emma's wedding is her big moment to celebrate life. I understood the sentiment, but it didn't change the practicality. It felt like a tactical move to tug on my heartstrings so I'd cave. When I still didn't agree to the big production, she suggested that maybe they could pay me back for any damages. But how do you put a price on emotional stress, plus the long-term changes to my property? Even if they offered a fair sum, which I doubt they could, it wouldn't truly fix the anxiety or the property modifications that might be permanent. A more surprising twist: my own mother tried playing mediator. She suggested I let Emma hold the wedding but lay down rules. Except these rules would still involve me getting permits and allowing them to re-landscape a portion of the farm, just with me overseeing it so it wouldn't get too out of hand. She even said she'd come stay with me to manage the chaos. This came from a well-meaning place, I'm sure, but it felt like yet another way of telling me to cater to Emma's demands instead of telling Emma to dial it back. Then there's the fiancé's family, who apparently found out about my reluctance and started labeling me a bridezilla's worst nightmare, the friend with the dream venue who refuses to help. One of them left me a voicemail that basically said, "You know, Emma loves you like a sister, and you're being unbelievably petty. Weddings are about community." Yes, weddings can be about community, but the expectation that the entire community must reshape their lives and land to accommodate a single wedding is absurd. It's not like I'm refusing to let her use my living room for a bridal shower. I'm refusing to let her bulldoze my backyard and disrupt my livelihood for an event that's grown into a mini Coachella. All this drama started to wear me down. There was a moment, about a week after my initial talk with Emma, when I actually considered caving. The constant pressure, the barrage of texts, the heartbreak of seeing my once close friend call me selfish to mutual acquaintances got to me. I began questioning if maybe I was blowing things out of proportion. Was I being cruel by not letting her special day overshadow everything else? But then I looked around the farm, at the orchard my grandparents planted, the squeaky barn door that's been in our family for decades, the patches of wildflowers that my late grandmother said brought good energy to the land. This isn't just property to me, it's a living memory. Emma wanted to tear up a good chunk of it, all for a party that would last a few hours. The sense of violation I felt was overwhelming, and that's when I knew for sure I couldn't go through with it. I told Emma, in no uncertain terms, that I was out. Not just you can have a smaller wedding, but I'm sorry, this isn't going to work at all. I said I needed to protect my home, my sanity, and our friendship from further damage. If she wanted me at her wedding, I'd gladly show up for her, at a different venue. I even offered to help her research barn-style venues nearby that were already set up for big events. She hung up on me, and I haven't heard from her directly since. She did, however, post a long rant on social media about disloyal friends who refuse to help you in your time of need. She didn't name me explicitly, but everyone knows she's talking about me. The comments are about 50-50, with half the people saying, "Your friend's the worst," and the other half giving vague condolences or politely suggesting that maybe she should calm down. I've had a few nights of restless sleep over this because I never wanted it to come to a big falling out. The idea of losing a friend I've known for years hurts, but the version of Emma I'm seeing now is so alien to me. She's more concerned with aesthetics and cost-saving measures than she is about my comfort and the fact that this space means everything to me. Interestingly, some people from my local area chimed in when they saw her posts, noting that our township is pretty strict about large events on private property. One of them mentioned that the local government might have shut Emma's plans down anyway if she tried to push forward without a special permit. That gave me a bit of relief, but also made me sad that Emma tried to bulldoze right over those concerns. I'm still processing how quickly it all spiraled. One minute, Emma was my friend who joked for years about how she'd get married on my farm. The next, it's an all-out war of words with me feeling like the antagonist in her fairy tale wedding plans. I don't know if our relationship will ever fully recover from this, but I do know I'll continue to put my farm and my well-being first. In a way, this has taught me a big lesson about standing up for myself, especially when sentimental ties are involved. It's really easy to cave under pressure when people frame your refusal as destroying their dreams, but sometimes, protecting your own peace and treasured space has to come first. For now, Emma and her fiancé are apparently looking into other venues. I heard through the grapevine they're already behind schedule because of all the time they wasted trying to strong-arm me, which I guess they blame on me, too. But that's beyond my control. I've done all I can to be clear, and if they can't respect that, it's on them. I'm holding out hope that once the dust settles, maybe after their wedding, Emma might realize she put me in an impossible situation. If that day comes, maybe we can patch things up. If not, I'll look back on this as the moment our friendship reached its limit. Either way, the farm is staying as is. I'm not about to level the orchard or fill in a pond or do anything else extreme just to host an event that should have been special for both of us, not just convenient for her. That's where things stand. I have no idea if Emma will reach out again or continue to ice me out until she needs something else, but I'm not chasing her down anymore. This whole experience has drained me, and I need a break from the wedding drama. My animals still need feeding, the garden still needs tending, and life goes on at my grandparents' farm, exactly as they intended it. Update 2. The wedding happened last weekend at a venue 2 towns over. Word is that Emma found a place willing to accommodate her big vision, and they apparently charged her a small fortune. I got invited. She texted me at the last minute, which felt more like a formality than a genuine olive branch. After all the drama, I chose not to go. It felt hypocritical to show up and pretend everything was fine. A couple of mutual friends told me the wedding looked beautiful but was slightly over the top, which, honestly, tracks with everything else. Emma and I haven't spoken directly since I told her no was final. The last contact was a short message she sent, accusing me of letting her down and never really being there for her. It stung, but I've made peace with it. The fallout revealed a side of her I wasn't prepared to see, and it showed me the limits of our friendship. A few people have asked if I regret not budging on the farm. The truth is, seeing how complicated her event was, even with a venue designed for weddings, only reinforces my choice. My farm was never meant to handle that scale of madness. It's my home, a piece of family history, not just an open field waiting to be molded into someone's Pinterest dream. If Emma still can't respect that, then maybe we've grown apart more than I realized. Now that the dust has settled, my animals are still happily roaming the property, and life feels calm again. A couple of acquaintances hinted I should turn the farm into a venue for extra income, but I have zero interest in that. Preserving the place as my grandparents left it means more to me than any potential windfall. I wish I had a fairy tale ending to share, like Emma suddenly seeing the light and apologizing, or us meeting up to talk it out over coffee. That didn't happen, and maybe it never will. But I don't regret drawing a boundary to protect what matters to me. Sometimes, standing firm is the only way to stay true to who you are, even if it means losing someone who once felt like a lifelong friend. This is where I'm leaving things. I'm sad it ended on a sour note, but I won't compromise on something as personal as my home. If Emma ever wants to have a real conversation and acknowledge why this was such a big ask in the first place, I'll be open to it. Until then, I'm moving forward with no hard feelings, just clarity about where our friendship stands and relief that I stayed true to my roots.